Hi guys, welcome back to Cross Art. Today our lesson is about paint mixing and how to use only your three primary colours and a white and a black to create a range of different colours. I'm going to step you through an exercise on how to practice colour mixing and blending, and then I'm going to do a little artwork using just those colours. So what you'll need for today's lesson is a yellow acrylic, a red acrylic and a blue. So I've got a cool red, a cool blue and a cool yellow there. So our very classic standard three primary colours. And I also have a pure white and a pure black, just in art and students acrylic. So we're just going to be using those colours today. The reason being is it's a really important skill to know as an artist, how to mix colours, so you don't need to buy every single colour. You should be able to work out what makes up a colour and how to mix that using your primaries. The other thing I want you to do is create a page something like this. So what I've done here is gone through some magazines and cut out a number of colour swatches. Just random colours that I found in a magazine. I've also tried to put them in a bit of a colour order, but not being too concerned. You'll notice it's not neat. This is just an activity. It's a learning task. It's not a final piece. This is a way of practicing how to mix colour. The other thing you'll need is a palette. I'm just using these tear off palettes, but you could use just a plate or something. Ideally use something that is white or a plain colour, which will help you with your mixing rather than already working from a coloured surface. Last thing you might find useful is a colour wheel. Now I had a look on the App Store this morning and I come across a colour wheel app, which is really simple. I might step you through it a little bit more later. It's a bit hard, you'll see a reflection there. But this is a really good tool for helping you understand what colours make up other colours. And you can see down the bottom, if I click on the primary colours, it shows what they will do, pardon me, to the colours on the colour wheel. That's a really basic introduction to the colour wheel. I would recommend that you download a colour wheel app as a useful tool and a good thing to reference. All right, I'm going to swap my camera around so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll go through this task together. All right, so what I have done is I have set up my desk with my palette. I've used a small blob of each paint, and you can see that I've spaced each dob of paint out so that I've got room to mix on my palette. The other thing I forgot to mention that you will need is some water and a little bit of paper towel to dry a brush. Now I'm just going to be using a small brush today like this, because I'm only doing a small area, but you might find it useful to have a couple of brushes on the go so you can have light colours and dark colours without needing to wash your brushes too much. So the idea of this activity is to practice our colour mixing abilities. What basically I want you to do is aim to match each of these colour swatches as best you can by just mixing your three primaries and your black and your white. So I'm going to start off showing you how to get a couple of these colours, and then I'll put it on time lapse and you can watch the rest as I go through. So I'm going to start with this mustard yellow up here. Now you'll notice that it's a lot darker than my yellow here. So that tells me that I need to add something darker to the paint to make it that mustard colour. A little tiny bit of black is what I'm going to use. Just a small amount of black. And that will make my yellow appear darker. You'll notice it's still not quite that mustard tone because I feel like it's got a little bit of a red hint to it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of red, and you can see how quickly that can change it. In fact, that's almost pretty good to the next colour. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow back into that. And then I'm going to come back to that really nice mustard. And if I paint underneath, that's pretty close. I would say that that's a pretty good match. Probably even a little darker. You could add a little bit more yellow to that. You can actually colour match on your page if you want. And there you go. Next colour is a red orange. So we've already mixed up a bit of an orange there. Just adding a little bit more of our red base to it because we know red and yellow make an orange. And dependent on how much of each colour you get, you should end up with the colour that you want. There's that nice red orange colour. You can see I'm adding a little bit more red to it to try and get it to match perfectly. Alright, I'm going to move down to this maroon colour. Now it's a little bit multi-toned here because I did have to cut it out of a magazine. So I'm just going to go with the middle there, that maroon. So the same with the mustard. It's a red tone, but it needs to have a little bit of dark added to it. Now I feel like it's quite a purple colour, so I'm going to put a bit of red through, turn it into a purple because we know that red and blue make purple. And you can see that's too dark now. So by adding a little bit more red, you should end up with a nice maroon. Pretty good in that centre there. And you can see, so far I haven't actually touched my white paint. White is a good colour, or hue I should say to be correct, for creating a lighter colour, but it also creates a real creamy effect, which is not always what we want. If we want that real bright clarity of colour, I recommend staying away from your white and really just working with your primaries and black. However, I will show you, I'm just washing my brush, show you how to create this really pastel colour. So this is sort of the tone where you will need to add a white. I'm going to add a little bit of white to what I've already created to get a nice milky purple. That is still too bright, so I'm going to put a little bit more white with it. Now, you'll notice I'm only mixing tiny little bits. I'm not squashing a big bit of paint onto my palette and going nuts with it because I don't need that much paint. A tendency that students have is to squirt out so much paint on their palette that would be enough to paint their bedroom walls, when really we don't actually need that much. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's test it out. So that's a nice, needs a little bit more white, pastel colour, and that's when you add the white. But you don't always add white to make something brighter because it'll actually make it more of a pastel. This colour here, I'm going to use the same pastel purple but add a little bit of this purple that I've created before. I'm just going to check you can see my palette. Yep. And I reckon that's about right. So you can start to see how versatile our wonderful primary colours can be. You don't need to buy a purple and a yellow, orange and a mustard to get this amount of variation with your paint. You just need your primary colors and a black and white. I mean, it's always good to be able to go into an art shop and buy exactly the right color that you want. It's quite an exciting thing to do. I love going and buying different colored paints. It's one of my guilty pleasures. However, it's not necessary. You can make all the colors that you need using those primaries. I'm going to move down to our green here for a little bit to show you how to make a couple of green colors. Now, as we know, you should know this by now on your color wheel, blue and yellow make green. So we're going to mix up the green. Now, because this is a pastel color, if you were in here in person, I would ask you, what do I do to make this a pastel? And you would all tell me, add a little bit of white, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you, class. And then we've got this lovely pastel mint green. It's actually one of my favourite colours. A little bit more white to it, and you can see I can actually mix on my page to get it exactly how I want. So there's that lovely mint green colour, very 50s. Still a little bit bright actually, I think it needs a bit more white. Tone it down a little. All right, olive green, I'm gonna skip this one, but olive green is a really interesting color to create. It's often used for native plants. If you were doing a painting like one of my previous videos of the Banksia or the Protea, I use olive green a lot to get that real native Australian bush color. It can be made using your primary colors, it just takes a little while. So we're going to make a green again. I'll just move that up. A green, which we know is our blue and our yellow. Going to make it a darker green than this green here. Now to make a darker green, you add more blue. And you get that's a nice colour, that teal. Now it's still not the right olive green that I'm looking for. This is when I'm going to add a little bit of black. And it'll darken up that colour and start making it more olivey. Now you can see, like I said, it is a tricky colour to mix. I've still got that teal colour. So that tells me I need to lighten it up or brighten it up a little bit. That doesn't mean add white, that means add more yellow. I'm just going to get a clean brush, so or you could use a palette knife if you've got one, and add a little bit more yellow to that mix. And then we should be getting that olivey army green colour coming through. Getting there. You may find adding a tiny little bit of that warm orange that we created up here into that mix might be what it needs. And I can tell you, there you go, it does, that mixing colours is partly theory. Obviously if you're using your colour wheel, then it's partly colour theory, but it's also a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of mixing and going, no, I don't see, that's not quite right. Okay, I need to add a little bit more of something to make this more the colour that I want. So I'm adding a little bit of purple to that, which is getting it to a more of a similar shade. Still too dark. And you can see I'm just working it on the paper till I get the colour that I want. That's better there. So it needs more yellow. Still not exactly right, but you can see if I work that more with my yellow, it would tone down. Could add a tiny little bit of white now, because it is a little bit pastely. And that's sort of brought it back to what we want. I'm going to flip my page around so that you can see the blue here, because I want to show you how to make this really bright blue. Because if you look at your blue straight out of the tube, that's what you get. Which is a lovely colour, but not a lot of things in the world are just that bright blue. It'd have to be a pretty warm day for that to be the case. To mix our different tones of blue, I'm going to add a little bit of white. And then we can bring that blue to a shade that's a little bit more realistic. This one, it's a little bit more lighter, so a little bit more white to our palette. And I would go as far as to say, if you're watching over here on my mixing palette, a little bit of green. It's got a hint of green through there. This one, it's obviously a little bit darker, those two, so I'm going to use this colour, this colour that I used here, but add black, because black's going to make things darker. And that brings the colour down to more of a dusty, darker blue. Rather than that really bright out of the tube blue, which is a lovely colour, but sometimes it's not generally the most realistic of blues that you might be finding that you need, especially if you're painting interiors or still life or something like that. Alright, the last one I'm going to show you before I finish the rest in time lapse is this dark blue here. It's almost a navy, and you guessed it, it is blue plus black. So our cool blue from the tube plus some black from the tube, and that will create a really nice navy blue colour. Now this colour here is one that I would use a lot. I talked to you a lot about shadows in a previous video where I drew some apples, and also in a video where I drew a couple of pears. And you'll notice that the shadows that I use are not often black. I usually use a blue or a really dark navy because it has a little bit more warmth to it, and generally shadows are not purely black. So I would use a navy kind of colour, and that's just mixing that blue with the black. Just add a little blue to it. Now it's not quite right because I think it's got a little bit of a red base, so I'm just going to add to it a tiny bit of red to make it more of a purple colour. That's pretty good now. Okay, these two colours here I've added because they are black, but they're not solid black. And again, I would refrain from using a solid black too often, because like it is very solid and it can take over an entire picture. So mixing black with a little bit of white, as you know, will create a gradient or a contour, a gradient, when I said contour, of different colours. So you don't want a pure black, maybe you want to mix that with some white so that you get a nice grey. And same with that one as well. It's not pure black, it's a grey. So experiment with using your white and mixing it with black to create a gradient or a range of different greys that you could use in shadows. Alright, I'm going to pop it onto time lapse now and finish off these last couple of swatches, so watch along. And then I'm going to use my palette to create an artwork. So I'll do that now. So there you have it. This is my finished swatch page. And I think it's quite remarkable what you can do with just the primary colours in black and white. I find colour so fascinating. It's one of my favourite things to use. I love colour. And I just think it's so magical that you can use red, yellow and blue, black and white to create so many different colours. Look at that, amazing. Now this is my palette that I used, and you can see where I've mixed all sorts of different colours and mixed over the top of those. What I'm going to use before the paint dries is I'm actually going to paint a picture using the paint on my palette to prove to you that it is very doable to use those colours to create a really multicolored artwork. Look at that, amazing. That's just with black, white and your 3 primary colors. So that is the activity that I would like you to have a go at, using magazine cuttings for color swatches and challenging yourself to match your colors as best you can using your primary colors and black and white. And then obviously go ahead and create an acrylic painting with the... I hope you enjoyed this colour tutorial. Don't forget to download a colour wheel, which can really help you with understanding what colours make what. And ideally, the best thing to do to learn to mix colours is to have a go. When you are creating artworks, I'd really highly recommend that you don't use the colour directly out of the tube that you are mixing. It will make it look a whole lot more realistic. It'll give it a whole lot of more dynamics and depth if you are blending and mixing your colours instead of just using them straight from the tube. So I'm going to pop it back onto time lapse now and complete a little painting with this acrylic paint. Again, just using red, yellow, blue, black and white. Bye for now.